So I'll be game reviewing the Fnatic versus Origen game of week 2 from Summer Split. Thought the drafts were really interesting this game, so it's gonna be fun to see it. So level 1, I think this is interesting to point out. Some people might be wondering why are they giving up the red buff so early. They're not even trying to contest. And the main reason is most champions damage at level 1 is AD, and like both Graves and Wukong get a lot of armor because of the way their passives and E-buff work. So they're really unkillable early game, and then they also do very good damage. So there's not a chance that Malphite and Set ever win this fight. Even if it's a different kind of champ, like Malphite and Set obviously are never gonna win because they're not really level 1 champs. But even if it's something like stronger, usually you wouldn't be able to win against the combo of Wukong and Graves. So when Graves invades the red buff like this, what I expect is for the Graves to just take over the top side jungle. And maybe I should actually open Magic Pen here. Hold up. Epic Pen, not Magic Pen. Okay. So what I expect from the Graves is just to take over the top side, and I'll do blue. Okay. So he's just gonna take this camp. This is too big. Let me fix this. I'm sorry. So he's just gonna take red buff. He's gonna take raids. He could path into here if he wants to. Most of the time, what's common, he takes red, he takes raids, and then he comes all the way down here. If he can gank, he does. Probably is never in a position, so he just goes. He takes this. He takes this. He takes this. Some people, what they also do is they take this. They go into raids. They go all the way around. They take their own raids because the set is gonna come into his red side anyways. So they want to make it so that's not possible. So he loses one camp, and then from here they go. Oh, I deleted. They go from they go for a blue side clear, and then they get scuttle, which is really it's less common, but I think Graves can do it because he clears fast enough. So yeah. What ends up happening here? It's actually really interesting. So Nemesis is losing mid, which is expected. Probably not by this amount. He should have like 200 more HP or so, maybe even more. But he probably misplayed at some point. Fnatic knows that Set is bot side, and even though and adding to that, like Nemesis doesn't have a lot of HP, even if he's getting level 2 from here. So I'm not sure why the Graves is trying to gank here. Like doing the path, like coming from here, it's completely fine. But the moment he walks into this bush, it's really risky because there's a really good chance that Set is like right here or like in this whole area. So you shouldn't really try and face check this bush. I think it was really weird by Selfmade, and he ends up getting punished by it. Ends up losing the flash, yeah. And now what this also makes is that he can't go and get the raids, which I'm not sure if it was his intention. Maybe he was actually going for the red buff, and if he was, it's really weird. So even though he lost all his health and if his flash, he still goes for the red buff, and I think this is really bad. So I think this is really bad because you know that the bot lane from Fnatic doesn't have pressure, so this is getting pushed in. The Origen has pressure, and then the Set has more HP and still has flash. So the Graves can't ever contest this. Like bot lane is always gonna come from here, Origen is gonna come from here. And it's always gonna be a 3v2 if Nemesis joins, or 4v3 if Soraka decides, or if Leona decides to leave, because Soraka needs to stay in lane. So there's never a chance that Fnatic ends up winning this red buff. So Selfmade ends up putting himself like behind by 10 seconds, maybe a bit more, which ends up being really bad. If he just ran to his blue side camps, he could just be clearing them a lot faster. But it's not the end of the world or anything, so it's still fine. It just puts him behind slightly, and it's not so great. Now I try to go for a gank. Blow his flash. He never really dies there, and he has Soraka, so I think it's really weird that he's recalling here, especially because I think Soraka just got level 3. So yeah, Reckless gets level 3 here, and the Leon is low on HP, he still has 2 pots, right? So I think what should happen is that he puts a point into his W and just the Leona stays in lane. He heals the Leona, and then they push all the way to the turret, and then they go base. Now what they might be afraid of is that Sett just reganks, and then I guess, yeah, it actually makes sense to just recall. You put 2 points on the Soraka Q so you can clear faster, and it just gets some solo EXP. Like, Soraka doesn't need all this minion gold, she just needs the XP, because even though she scales really well with gold early game, she's really effective even without it. So it's completely fine for her to give up some CS. So this play isn't really terrible. I just think that if you're not afraid of the Sett reganking, you should make it so the Leona stays in lane. But if you are, then I think this is completely fine. And Sett is more of a sinner kind of champ, so I think it's completely fine. Excuse me. Upset ends up getting a bit of a freeze here, and now he's gonna get the really good recall, which is really good for their bot lane. Yeah, and I think they're gonna try to freeze this wave, even if it's not. So let me just put this back here. So even if they can't freeze this wave, like even if they end up killing like these 3 minions, which makes it unfreezable, I think it's still really good that they're at least trying, because there's gonna be they're denying like 2 or 3 minions of EXP by doing this, and they don't really lose anything, because Ezreal doesn't want to base yet. It'd much rather wait for the next wave to arrive, and then he slow pushes this wave, and then he pushes with the next one, and it gets to the turret, and he recalls, and he probably has about, he either gets Sheen or he gets Pickaxe and Sapphire Crystal, I think, which is a really decent recall. He can also just go tier and like Sapphire Crystal, which is also fine. You're not really gonna kill anyone in this lane, so it's completely fine. Now Graves comes into bot. He's probably trying to avoid the freeze, which is really reasonable. I think Fnatic ends up breaking it, just because Soraka Q is just so good at breaking freezes from a distance. Yeah, so in case you don't know about this, you need 4 healthy casters, and they don't need to be like super. They don't need to be like full HP, like this HP here, around this HP. You need 4 casters and 1 melee. That's really healthy, and then you can do a permafreeze. So what happens is, when you only have 3 casters, the next wave you lose 2 minions, and then the wave after you lose 1 minion, so you lose 3 minions by leaving the wave like this if you're Fnatic. But the wave always pushes into you, so it's completely fine for them to leave it like this. Yeah, and Origen isn't even gonna try to freeze because Fnatic is gonna recall, so they want to get the push going, so they can have a really good recall. It's completely good. Oh, it's completely fine. Now they're waiting for the next wave, and then they're gonna hard push once the wave arrives. TP mid, that's completely fine. Okay, so this is actually interesting. What Origen ends up doing is they give up the recall, which isn't that big of a deal. Maybe Upset is like really close to a really good recall, like Shin and Tyr, or even like Shin and Pickaxe. I think he's really close to Shin and Pickaxe, or not Shin and Pickaxe, my bad. Tyr and Pickaxe, but he might be even. He might be able to actually get a Shin and Tyr if he waits, which is really strong. So what they're doing is they're delaying the recall and getting the Drake, which is completely fine, especially with an early game jungler like Sett. So I think this play is really smart by Origen. As long as Ezreal has enough mana to push the next wave, it's completely fine. And here you see Malphite bullying a bit of Wukong. The matchup is not super favorable for Wukong. He wins like levels 1. He wins levels 1, 2, and maybe 3, and then from there onwards, it just gets Q spammed and he loses long trades against Malphite because of his attack speed debuff and his doubling. So all of this is really expected. There's nothing super wrong with it. Now this is where the interesting play happens. So Origen is rotating their bot lane to top, and it's only 7 minutes into the game. So like even if they kill the Wukong, they're never getting the Herald, like just from that. So I'm not quite sure why this is happening. And the other thing is they don't know where Graves is, I think. So there's a really good chance that they just get counter ganked, and this ends up being a disaster for Origen. And yeah, self-made blunders there, but it's honestly not that big of a deal. Now self-made is like really ahead in terms of gold. Not so much in terms of camps or EXP, but he is really ahead in terms of gold. So yeah, this play is really weird. I actually took some notes about this. So the main thing is like maybe you're thinking, okay, we're gonna blow Wukong's ult, and then by the time Herald comes up, he's not gonna have it, which I think it's completely fine. My biggest issue with this play though is that if you're gonna blow Wukong ult, you usually need to use Malphite's ult, so like you're going even in terms of ults. And I'd argue that Wukong is slightly more useful than a Malphite without his ultimate. And then the other thing is this wave. I'm not sure if we get to see it. We can see it slightly here. The minions are healthy because they just arrived, and the Malphite is hitting them because he wants to dive, right? But what Malphite could do, and this, like the Wukong is forced to recall every time. So from the moment Wukong recalls, what Malphite could have done is just let the minions like this and just go back. And then what would happen is that this wave would crash, or Wukong can't push this wave fast enough, so it would crash more or less like here. And even if Wukong can do it, Malphite has TP advantage, so he can just force the freeze. So not only does Malphite get a favorable lane state, Malphite also gets TP advantage because he's not forced to TP unless Wukong has like Tiamat or something, which he can't buy. So this play ends up being a double negative in my eyes, because if the wave gets stuck here, then it's really easy for the bot lane to just, they catch this wave, instead of roaming top, they just go bot, they catch this wave, they push it all the way, and then they start roaming up by like the 7:30 mark or something, and they can come top, and the wave will be in a really good spot for the Wukong to be ganked. So Wukong is gonna hate his life. With that said, obviously Graves can just come top and break the freeze, but even then, like, that's a good outcome for Origen because they get to know where Graves is. So I thought this play was really unnecessary, but I end up going for it. It doesn't pay off, which is sad, but it happens. Now both bot lanes go top. The top laners don't have TP and don't have ult, so they can't really impact this in any way. And Origen, they have pressure in mid, and they're always gonna have the push on top lane, so the Fnatic ends up giving up the Herald, which is fine. Herald is really good if you're playing against control mages. So like if Fnatic got the Herald this early, they'd probably want to crash it mid because it's really hard to destroy turrets against control mages, just because they're so safe and they have so much control. So it would be nice if Fnatic could have it, but since Fnatic doesn't have a control mage themselves, even if they lose tier 1 mid, it's completely fine. Well, it's not completely fine, but it's not the end of the world. Because okay, so I'm explaining this poorly. So the thing with Rift Herald is that it makes it a lot easier to take tier 1 turrets, right? And it makes it a lot easier specifically against control mages. So stuff like Orianna, Syndra, Zoe to some extent, stuff that can clear waves easily. Origen is probably the best example of it. So Fnatic has Echo. So even if Origen doesn't get the Rift Herald, it's still really easy to just force on Echo and slowly chip away at his turret. Because his Q, he needs 2 Qs to clear a wave, and it takes so long. It's like 6 seconds because you need to throw the Q, you need to wait. And you can like, you can't even throw the Q when the wave is like coming like through here. I don't know if you can see it. Like when the wave is coming through here, because someone can just body block it. So Echo takes a while to clear waves compared to Oriana, where if the wave like gets close, she just QWs and it's like the easiest thing in the world. So like even if Origen takes the Rift Herald, it does help them take the tier 1 turret, but it would go down anyways. So it's not that big of a deal for Fnatic. Now Fnatic ends up capitalizing on this. There's no one bot and they know about it, so Alphari ends up dying. Not much Alphari could do. He doesn't have boots, so he can't really run away from the Wukong. Like, I guess there's an argument that he could have just like ulted away as soon as he saw the Wukong E, but I think that's really unreasonable to expect, especially because you don't have vision of Graves yet, so yeah, not much you can do. It happens. It's not really that big of a deal for Origen. He's a tank, so he's gonna be fine. What I actually would have liked to see from Origen's side, and they don't end up doing it, is that Graves was bot. So here you know that Graves was bot. You saw him recall, I think. Well, you didn't actually see him, but you know that he's not there anymore, and you know that his camps are most likely done. So I don't like this play. What I would have liked to see is Origen rotate bot with their bot lane like they did. And then Xerxes comes in and he pops the Herald, because you're playing against Echo, so he can't really defend the turret anyways. So if you ever want tier 1 turret on mid, like, you're completely fine taking it. So I'd much rather see them take the Herald bot and just try to chunk bot lane turret, because I think it's a lot more valuable, just from a gold standpoint. Because I don't think there's like, this Herald is never gonna take the tier 1 mid. It's just gonna facilitate taking it later. And you're against Echo, so like, you don't really need that help. So I'd much rather see it being pushed bot, and maybe they could have even taken the full turret, because you know that. Okay, so there's no TP on Wukong, and there's a TP on Nemesis, but there's a wait. Is there no TP on? Oh, so there's no TP on Orion. Okay, so maybe that play is actually not so good, because Nemesis could just TP bot, and then the dive can't really happen. So the outcome would be roughly the same. I still think it's worth trying, especially if Oriana just gets priority mid and moves down. Then it's actually really good in my opinion. But this is fine. It's not a bad play by any means. I just think there could be possibly a better one. Fnatic ends up getting the priority, and this is actually interesting. Even though I was saying there's no way Graves is bot, he ends up coming bot like shortly after. So he's giving up timers on his red buff, and actually I think, yeah, he's giving up timers on his red on his Gromp and on his Scuttle, but I think Nemesis is gonna take the Scuttle, so he doesn't really lose much by this, especially because Gromp is the worst jungle camp. They end up going for the Drake, and this is actually really good by Fnatic. Now this is a really interesting play, and I think most people that saw this play, like, when they saw it in live, they were like, this is really awful by Fnatic. Like, there's no reason to do this. The wave isn't even at the turret. Like, you can just take your time and wait. But actually, after seeing this play like 3 or 4 times, it's actually not that simple. And Upset like plays this really, really well. So I'll just let it play so people can see. Yeah, and now I'll go back. So I want you guys to watch the minimap. Trash is here, and Leone is coming up. I want you guys to watch that part of the minimap. Leone is gonna encounter Trash. Oh wait, Yeah, it's here. It's here. My bad. Leona ends up encountering Trash here. Now Trash is recalling, and Wukong is gonna face check. Now Trash stops the recall. And what do you see from this is that there's a really good chance that Trash is just walking bot. Like as soon as Trash cancels the recall, there's a really good chance that Trash is just walking bot because she just saw that the dragon was taken, so she knows that Graves is bot side. She saw the Leona because there was a control ward here, and she saw the Wukong. And usually Wukong would never be going bot, especially because like there's waves to be taken mid, so he's going to lose one. So there's a really good chance that something fishy is going on here. So Trash is just going bot, and Fnatic, I think they acknowledge that, and they're like, we can't really wait for the wave, we just have to go for the dive. And now, there's an argument that the dive isn't necessary, and I agree. But if they really want to make the dive happen, I think the decision they took is actually the right one. And now, honestly, the way Expect played, Upset played this is really good. Like, he cleanses instantly. Not only does he E away, like before the Q hits, which is really good. He cleanses instantly, so Soraka can never get in range for her E, and then he flashes away, so the Leona ult can't hit. Like from there, like I mean, it's really well played, and I don't think, I don't really expect people to be accounting for this kind of plays, so I think it's understandable that the dive didn't work. I don't think the dive was necessary to begin with, but if they want to do it, I don't think it's a terrible play. And most of the time it would probably work, but Upset played it really well. Another interesting thing, there won't be much happening in the game for a bit, so I'd like to talk about Graves' build. I think Graves ends up going Black Cleaver and Death Dance this game, and while that is the most common build, and I understand that, I think you'd much rather see a build where Wukong goes Black Cleaver, and I know some people are going to be like, but Triforce is so good, and I agree. But Wukong isn't going to be able to kill people in this game, because Oriana, she can build into, she has armor from her E. Set is going to build armor naturally. Malphite is going to build armor naturally. I'm ignoring a bit of what's happening in game because it's not really that important, in my opinion. Ezreal is going to build into Mana Immune and then he's going to get Death Dance, so he's really tanky. So Wukong can't really kill people this game. He can open the possibility for other people to kill people this game. So I think what should happen is Wukong goes Black Cleaver. He goes Black Cleaver Tiamat, so he has wave clear. He doesn't need to go Tiamat, I just think the item is good. And then you go Death Dance on Wukong, and you become extremely tanky, and, well, not extremely tanky, but you become tanky, and you can shred armor for Graves. And then what happens is Graves goes into crit, because it's so massive, like, the gold was just shown, is 1.5k ahead, and he's the person with the most gold in this game. So, like, this Graves is really massive right now. He has a 2-level lead, is even with most laners, or, well, he's basically even with laners, is a bit behind in the XP, and he has so much gold. So I think what should be happening is he goes into the crit build. And I know what you're thinking. No one builds crits on Graves. And the main reason people don't do that is because usually, if you go the Bruiser-esque build on Graves, you have an ADC, you have a mid laner that can do a lot of damage, and you don't need to kill people. You just need to soften them up so that your damage dealers can kill them. But in this game in specific, Graves is the damage dealer, and is so tanky with Soraka, and like with his natural amounts of armor, and he already has Merc Treads, so he already has resistance against the Oriana. So I'd much rather see a Black Cleaver on Wukong this game, and then a crit Graves because it's so massive, and he still had the option to go for it. And then he goes like something like Stormrazor, Death Dance, Stormrazor, Death Dance, and probably PD, and he's really strong. and unkillable in my opinion. If you don't want to build, you don't even need to build Stormrazor. I know some people don't like the item, like you can build other stuff. I just think that like going crit graves would be a lot better in this game. And then you get the the Black Cleaver on Wukong, and it's really good in my opinion. I also think it's interesting that Echo decides to go for an Asher's Tooth, and I think this is a bit of an adaptation because if he goes Lich Bane, he's never gonna kill anyone in one combo. He's just gonna soften them up, which can be okay. It's not a bad thing. But I think what he's thinking, and like a lot of people criticize this build, but I think if you think about it logically, it's actually not as terrible as it seems. I think what he's thinking is that I have Soraka on my team, and usually I can't really stay on top of people to like abuse the Nashers and just keep auto attacking. But since I have Soraka on my team, I'm gonna keep getting heals. And my team has like so many damage threats that they don't need to, it's really hard to just focus one person. So I'm gonna be able to use the extra cooldown reduction really well, and I'm gonna be able to use the extra on hit damage really well. And I think like when you think about his build choice like that, it actually makes a lot of sense. With that said, I don't think it's better than Lich Bane in this game in specific. And the main reason why I said it makes a lot of sense is that in a vacuum it makes a lot of sense. But against this team in specific, like you're playing against Malphite, he's gonna slow your attack speed down. You're playing against Set, he's gonna CC you. You're playing against Origen, she's really bulky. So like you're never gonna kill her. Like with Lich Bane or Nashers, you're never gonna kill her. And even with Nashers, unless she's like in a side lane, you're never gonna be able to auto attack her enough to like out damage Lich Bane, I think. And then you're playing against Ezreal, and he's really slippery. So like you're never really gonna be able to stick to him, and then trash, which doesn't really matter. So while I think the Nashers build has some merit, I don't think it's good enough this game. But to be fair for Nemesis, I think Echo isn't good this game. It's not his build, it's really the champion in my opinion. So not much happens right now. Fnatic is up to Drakes, which I think it's fine. They ended up trading the Herald for the Drake, which I think it's... I think Origen was in a worse spike because Soraka had almost 2 items, and like Wukong and Graves are really scary at that point into the game, so... I think it's completely fine for Origen to just give them the Drake and take the Herald, even if the Herald isn't worth as much. Now, this engage is really weird. So, Bwipo is like really far, is here, and Soraka is, well, she's way over down there. You can see on the minimap she's here. So, on top of that, they engage on Thresh, and wait, they engage on Orianna, but she still has flash. And there's a Thresh like right here, which they saw because they know that Thresh is somewhere in this area because they have a ward here. So they're never gonna kill this Orianna. Like it's literally impossible to kill this Orianna, and they have no follow-up. If they had follow-up, this engage suddenly becomes a lot more. It becomes a lot better. But like Wukong is really far. Origen knows that Wukong is here. Soraka is really far. Echo isn't close enough. So this engagement ends up making it so there's no real follow-up, and I mean Elisane dies for free. And then Nemesis, he goes to clear the ward because he thinks he's fine because they're running away, but he ends up dying, which is unfortunate. I don't think it's that big of a deal. Like, it gives some more gold, which is obviously bad, but that death in general isn't really why they lost the game or anything. You know, there's gonna be a team fight on Drake's spawn. We're just gonna be pushing waves, and then they're gonna approach. And the same thing happens here, very similar to what happened before. The Leon is just gonna go in, and Wukong isn't quite in a... I think this team fight is interesting because the engage itself isn't terrible. The only thing that we can like pick on is that Soraka is really far. She can't really help the team. But I think there's an argument that Soraka ultimate is enough to like buy time if they play this properly. So the Wukong goes in and he tries to ult. I think Bwipo was really greedy here. I think what he should have done is instead of greeting the ult, he should have just flash E'd and gone on these three guys. Because the only thing that can stop a Wukong engage is actually the Malphite. And if the Malphite is stunned right now, like if you get a Wukong ult on these three people, not only are you making it so you can engage safely, you're also making it so the Malphite can't go. You're also eating the Ezreal. So yeah, the Bwipo engage ends up not being super good, and I think that's the main reason they lose the fight. They try to re-engage with Soraka, but it's really hard to play into that team composition because they're all really tanky and slippery. And then that engage was really weird. Echo cooldowns were still on cooldown, so Selfmade gets a really good steal. So I wanted to say something else about this engage. I think there's definitely a world where like, and I don't expect this from Bwipo because maybe it doesn't have enough games, and like it's something that you need to think of on the spot, and it's really hard. Like I only thought of this like 3 or 4 times after watching this replay. So there's a world where Wukong flashes from here to here, and then he W's from here to here, and then he E's the Ezreal. So he gets a Wukong ult on the Orianna, and then he gets a Wukong ult on these three guys. And like that's definitely the best play, but it's really hard to execute. So I think the the simplest play is just flash, W, just go W, flash, or my bad, W flash, and then E here and ult those three people. And the engage would have probably been a lot better. I think the main reason this game went so poorly in team fights for Fnatic is that their communication wasn't really there. Like Nemesis is trying his best. The champion isn't really good, but he's doing what he can. He's actually doing a lot of damage in team fights, which is quite impressive, in my opinion. And then like Selfmade is really doing what he can, but I think the main reason this game isn't going super well is because of communication. I'm just gonna go ahead because there's not much to talk about for a while. We're just gonna, yeah, just a replay. Not much to say here. Now Origen, I'm actually really sad that we don't see how they arrive at this position because of the replay. But Origen just starts the Baron. It's a really good call. No one is close. They have vision around the Baron, so they can see if anyone is approaching, and they just get it. Now Fnatic goes on. Oh, this is actually looking kind of okay to Fnatic because Bwipo gets a good engage. They can now kill the Malphite, and I think Bwipo ends up overextending. But to be fair to him, like if the Malphite hadn't ulted him, like if Malphite doesn't go here, he gets a 4-man ult, and then the Malphite dies, and they get a good engage. So like while it seems kind of an int play by Bwipo and like is overextending because his team is really far behind, I think the intent was actually really good, and he got outplayed because Alfari could ult him while also running away. And then a really sick play happens with Origen and Set, and Ezreal just really takes over the game. And I don't think there's much to say about this game anymore. Like Fnatic can still win, but I think it's really hard because everyone on OG's side is really tanky, and you don't have the right items on your carries. I think if you had what's it called? I think if you had Crit Graves with Black Cleaver Wukong, you'd have a really decent chance because the Graves is so massive. But even with that build, I'm not sure it would have been enough. So yeah, they're just trying to push. End up getting the inhibitor. Not much to say. Alfari. Some people might be wondering like why is he doing this? Like he doesn't have TP, so he can never join the fight, and just keeping Soraka away is really good. And you also end up drawing attention to the Wukong, which is even better. So yeah, they just end up running, they go for the Drake. Is there a fight? No, okay. They just go for the Drake, and I think Selfmade ends up stealing it? Or maybe there's a team fight happening, I'm not sure. Oh, okay. So Nemesis actually kites this really well. He does a lot of damage in this team fight. Even though like he ends up dying, I think like he does a lot in this team fight, and Fnatic ends up winning. So they get the Ocean Soul, and now there's actually hope for them, which is really big. Just kind of scroll up for a team fight, because there's not much to say. Like Bwipo ends up getting caught. He still has flash. He could have flashed away. Like in hindsight, it's really easy to talk about this kind of stuff. So like, I'm not saying Bwipo played the game bad. I think he could have done certain stuff a lot better. But like, he's in a high pressure situation, so I don't really blame him. But like here, instead of flashing forward, he can try to stay here so Soraka heals him, and after the Soraka heals him, he can think about going forward. It's probably a communication thing more than anything. It's also like really hard to tell if Bwipo made this decision or if it was like Nemesis or Illisang or like anyone. So I don't really want to put blame on him specifically. It's just easy to do because obviously he's the one piloting the champion. Yeah, Fnatic ends up losing. They kind of get close, which is really scary, but it's not enough, and they end up losing the team fight. So overall, I think the main takeaways is if the builds were slightly different from Fnatic's side, maybe they had a better chance. But overall, I think the Echo pick made it really hard for Nemesis to play the game. I think the Soraka ADC, she is definitely fine, but I think you need reliable damage from somewhere else. And with the Bruiser Graves and the Wukong build that kind of fell behind, you can't really do that. Also, Origen's comp was really slippery and tanky, so it's really hard to execute. This was my first game review, so I'm not really experienced on this. Maybe I rambled too much, maybe it went well, I'm not sure. I hope you enjoyed it, and give me feedback please. Thank you.